Highway 99, or the Sea to Sky Highway, it is a major artery that connects our communities. It brings millions of visitors into our towns each year. We travel it back and forth to work, and we drive it with our friends, our families, and our loved ones. Despite all of the positive things that the highway brings into our lives, it also brings a fair bit of stress and tragedy because of accidents and closures. On today's Upfront, I'll be chatting with Squamish Mayor Patty Heintzman about our Sea to Sky Highway, its safety, and what it looks like in the future. Welcome to the show, Patty.
Thanks, Kristy.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to chat to you about this because this is a bit of a hot topic right now, as it tends to be each year. But I'd like to go back and kind of look at all the big improvements that have happened to the Sea to Sky over the years. Of course, going back a good 10 years now to all of those big changes that we went through. But I'm curious, what kind of recent changes have happened, maybe in the last year or so, to improve its safety?
There haven't been too many changes. The main one has been down near Lions Bay, where there was a series of accidents in the northern stretch of Lions Bay and north, where there was no cement barrier. So they've taken away sort of the boulevard effect and put actual no-post cement barriers up there. I think their hope is that it will minimize or mitigate head-on collisions, which really are the ones that have the fatalities associated with them, or predominantly the fatalities. So if we can minimize those head-on collisions, that's just one step in making our highways safer. Doesn't mean we're going to get rid of accidents, but the severity and the head-onness of it certainly will help and has proven to be effective in reducing fatalities.
And I've noticed too, in Lions Bay, as well as from Squamish to Whistler, there are the reminders of your speed. Are you finding that those are helping people, remind them to slow down in inclement weather?
They're probably not as effective as I would like them to be. What people don't understand, and I think this highway, and you talked about how many visitors come here, and certainly the people who live here know this is a mountain highway. There's no excuse for any resident of the Sea to Sky corridor, whether you're in Darcy, Pemberton, Whistler, Squamish, and anywhere in between, to not have proper winter tires on in the winter and be prepared for mountain inclement weather that comes with being in a mountain coastal environment. That's what we live in. But we do have a lot of visitors. And interestingly, I was at a stoplight in Squamish the other day, and there was 3 budget renter cars in a row. They just happened to be budgets all in a row, and I noticed there was a sticker. And literally, I think one of them I looked like it was summer tires to me. I'm not a tire expert. And the other 2 were sort of that all-weather variety that just, to be honest, don't cut it on a highway like ours. So that's obviously one thing, is making sure people are using the right tires for the highway.
And I found that, obviously here we all know, okay, we got to get our winter tires on and drive for the conditions. I found the messaging about the whole winter tire thing quite strong throughout the Lower Mainland, like pushing that information out to people in Vancouver and around. But you still see people coming up without winter tires on. So do you think that there's a communication lack in there, or?
I think some people think it's expensive, and some people think, well, I only go up there periodically. I'll take my chances that it's going to be on a good weather day and not a bad weather day. It costs, and this is a bit of a beef with me with the rental car companies. If you want to get winter tires on a rental car company, you pay a huge premium to get that car to be able to drive up here.
So they are available on the rental cars?
Sometimes they're not even available, but if they are available, there's hundreds of dollars of premium put on that.
Really?
To put winter tires on.
It should be the same premium, I would think.
I would think.
Yeah. I did read an article about a family, I think they were in Ontario, and they were planning a trip to Whistler, and they canceled their trip because they couldn't get a rental car that ensured that they would have a safe vehicle with the proper tires on it.
Absolutely. I suspect that happens on a daily basis with the rental car companies. Ideally, what we actually start to get, and this is a whole other conversation, is about how do we connect our communities with the Lower Mainland and to the north with proper, robust public transportation, so that people don't have to fly into the airport and get a rental car, that they can actually get up and get throughout the community at an affordable level too. Not, I understand a family of 4 not wanting to spend the $100 a ticket just to take the bus from YVR up to Whistler, although I suspect it's still way cheaper than renting a car for the week. So, but we need to create those really good transit connections, frequency, reliability, all those things to help people be able to get out of their car and give them an option not to have to drive in a single vehicle.
That would be
think,
nice to see more options for people that are visiting from out of town so they can still get up here and enjoy it.
And we're actively working on this, all the communities in the corridor, and we're actively working on it with the Ministry of Transportation, with BC Transit. There's currently a plan to start that service in 2019 sometime. I know all the mayors and elected officials in the corridor would like to see that ramped up to this fiscal year. And we're actively, I actually have a meeting with all the mayors this week to talk about how do we move these sea to sky issues, these sea to sky highway issues, transit issues forward as a collective, because I think there's more power in that. And we also ensure that we all understand each other's issues with the highway. As you said, this is the thing that connects us. Someone asked me, we had that terrible tragedy on the highway on the 2nd of January. And someone asked me, why does something on the highway affect us sort of almost more profoundly as a community than another type of tragedy within a family? And I think it's because, as you said, it's something it's part of our day-to-day existence. We all drive it every day to get even between neighborhoods, to get to work, to go skiing, to go to the city. You know, it's just part of our day-to-day existence in the core. It doesn't matter if you're in Whistler or Pemberton or Squamish or anywhere in between. It's part of your day-to-day existence. As soon as we hear about an accident, we all say, oh God, is it someone I know? Is it a friend? Is it a family member? Is it a coworker? Even if it isn't someone you know directly, you know someone who knows that person. That's how close and tightly knit our community is. We know people. And so it deeply impacts our community when these tragedies happen.
I agree too. That's always the first thought in my mind when I hear about a terrible accident. I wonder, is it someone that I know? And in the past, it has been someone that I know. And it's dreadful, you know, it just makes you feel sick.
It's tragic. It's especially in situations where, I mean, there's sometimes you just have inclement weather, or you have a condition that is unforeseen, and you know you can't predict it, you can't prepare for it. But so often it's human error, or the car wasn't in the right condition, or there's distracted driving or drunk driving, or so often it's human caused, or it's road design that's just not conducive to safe driving. So particularly when you have road design issues, and when you have other alternatives like public transportation that aren't even there to sort of take some of that pressure off and allow people to use that instead of carpooling or driving, then those are the things you really have to work on. You're never going to be able to account for people who just drive too quickly, or don't know how to, you know, or inexperienced drivers in this particular mountain environment, or get distracted, or you're never going to be able to account for that. You're not going to be able to account for a deer or a bear running across, or an elk running across the road. The variable speed, we have the variable speed highway between Squamish and Whistler, and we haven't sort of gotten any quantifiable data back yet on the success of it or not. But I'd be really interested in that. I mean, they have upped the speed limit to 100 depending on the road conditions of the day. I haven't been on the highway as much when the variable has been put below the speed limit, so I
have actually, and it's very handy because they lower it, but then it starts flashing. So as you're driving and you see that, you make a mental note, like, hey, there's something going on, like it's the weather isn't great, or the road conditions aren't great right now, and it's a constant reminder to slow down. So I feel like it should be effective, but that's for me. I mean, other people might just ignore that.
I find the other thing with the highway, and maybe you get that experience too, is there's people who live here and drive it all the time. They're very confident on the highway. They probably go a little bit faster than the speed limit, but they're very comfortable in that zone. And then you mix that with very inexperienced drivers who have never, you know, driven on a mountain highway, who are very timid, and they're going 70, and then you have someone going 100 because they're very comfortable on the highway, and you mix those two things, and you create that.
I think that's a dangerous situation. And I mean, if that's something that I really feel like people should remember, is that not everyone on the highways is going to be as comfortable as them, or has, you know, a big truck that they feel safe in with their big snow tires. It's not always the case across the board, and I think people should be more aware of that.
Absolutely.
And just slow it down, and you know, not everyone knows that road as well as we do.
We certainly have some critical areas where we think there's major design flaws, particularly in the interface with our community. So the Cleveland Avenue, which is our main street going into our downtown, and intersection with 99, has a very, very high accident rate. It doesn't necessarily have the high impact accident rate. There are head-on collisions, but predominantly they're rear-enders, because of the way the on-ramps are designed, and there's basically no acceleration lanes coming off Cleveland and going south, for example, or even coming off Loggers Lane and going north. There's no acceleration lanes. So you've got cars going very quickly. It's a 70-kilometer-an-hour zone there. Most people go 80 or 90. And then you have no acceleration lanes, and then people brake and people rear end them. ICBC has probably paid out, I saw a number, way more insurance on that corner than it would have been to fix the problem. ICBC, of course, is arm's length entity of the provincial government. The investment that MOTI could have made in improving that intersection is actually way cheaper than the insurance that was probably paid out at that intersection, let alone the costs of policing, ambulance, fire, hospital, justice, all those other hard to quantify costs, but they're definitely costs of those accidents that happen there. We're not just talking about 20 accidents, we're talking over a couple-year period, hundreds of accidents. So you think about the business case to invest the $1.5 or $2 million into fixing that intersection, and how you would, the return on investment of that, just from a purely financial, almost cynical point of view, is worth the investment. But for whatever reason, the provincial government hasn't made that investment to fix that corner. It's complicated. You're going to have to acquire a little bit of land, and you have to redesign, you make the effort. But we have literally been working on that issue since I've been mayor, so at least 3 years. It came to our attention that there were real design flaws at that intersection before I was mayor, and yet we still have not seen any action. And I've met with Minister of Transportation, current one, previous one. It's very frustrating when there's a real compelling reason to do it, and there seems to be no action from the provincial government.
We're going to be chatting about the highway safety here on the Sea to Sky, more after the break. Welcome back to Upfront. I'm Kristy Aleksich, and I'm sitting here with Squamish Mayor Patricia Heinzman, and we're talking all about the Sea to Sky Highway and the safety problems that we've been having recently, and maybe some ways that we can improve it. So going back to before the break, we were talking about a real problem area, which is Cleveland Avenue, downtown Squamish. Is there any other areas on the highway that are real standout places where a lot of accidents happen?
We talked about Lions Bay. Any time where you have a bridge, and this seems to be the case of what happened. There might have been other factors too, but it was icy cold, black ice, and bridges ice over. So I think people need to understand that anytime you go on a bridge, your temperature can change of the ground, and you can create an icy situation. So I think some more communication about the bridges in particular between Squamish and Whistler, where you get the elevation gain and you get the colder temperatures. I think there's certainly some areas where there's the angle of the road perhaps is not on the right, camber, going into a turn that could be looked at. We certainly have, from a community point of view, east-west connectivity integration issues, and the interface right against the highway in terms of roads and access to, particularly in the Highlands, the Mamquam Road area and the Garibaldi Way area. And we need to figure out ways of getting people in and on and onto the highway and across the highway more effectively, that doesn't bunch up traffic and create congestion and issues in that, that 400 meters from the highway kind of area. There's certainly a couple other small problems. I don't want to minimize it by saying small. For example, there's the log sorts across the Mamquam Blind Channel. The way the road comes up, it's very challenging for logging trucks to accelerate, and then they're very slow moving in, and you've got people coming down the hill from the Squamish Chief, and there's, I think, a great potential for some nasty stuff to happen in that, and I think there's been lots of near misses. So we've been talking with the Ministry of Transportation about how do we fix that intersection as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did read a little neat kind of fact that going back to before 2010, when all the big improvements happened to the highway, that the rate of accidents actually lowered by more than 60%, which I thought was huge. But then, of course, we're still seeing so many accidents. Is there anything else that we can do to make this highway more safe for everyone?
Yeah, I think the big thing that there was a few key areas that were corrected in the highway improvement project. The other thing was it was widened. So as soon wherever you have a 4 lanes, so 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south, there's a cement barricade, and that cement barricade in an appropriately widthed road area dramatically reduces, particularly the severity of the accidents. The problem with our highway is some areas there's 2 lanes, and so it's not practical or even safe sometimes to put the barricade, at least this is what the engineers and the experts say, to put the barricade in between there, because then safety vehicles can't access and you can't sort of do the 1 lane in different directions depending on, and so it becomes even more detrimental. I think there's a ironic side to that is that it may reduce the amount of vehicles, the amount of accidents you actually have to respond to. So, you know, there's, and then the 3 lane as well is there's some areas where the experts say that the barricade just doesn't make sense. So how do we make those areas safer? The other thing with that is, of course, those are the pinch points. And as you well know, anytime, particularly in the summer, one day last year it took me 2.5 hours to drive to Horseshoe Bay from Squamish. 2.5 hours. It should take 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It took 2.5 hours because it was literally a parking lot from West Vancouver, north of Squamish.
And that's in good weather in the summer.
And that was in good weather. That's sheer volume.
Yeah.
And every time you have a 2 or 3 lane area, it just gets pinched right down. And to
There's
the point
definitely
where
those spots where it's so tight, like there is no room to widen the highway.
yeah, well, you take the volume that's on 4 lanes and you squeeze it down to 2 and 3, and you just create these bottleneck after bottleneck after bottleneck. It took 30 minutes to get from the Highlands to Clark Drive, you know, the hospital. It was ridiculous.
And that's something that's going to just be an ongoing problem because we just seem to get busier and busier every year with more visitors.
And that's why public transportation becomes part of the solution. Maybe there's some sort of vehicle occupancy tax. Unless you have 2 or 3 people, you don't get in the fast lane, or like there's some mechanism to really encourage people to start thinking that they can't just be in their car by themselves. There's always going to be situations where you're going to need to be in the car by yourself, but we don't create the impetus to have people sort of to seek more than just the ease of just jumping in your car and driving. And it's affecting us all because it's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's who wants to spend 2.5 hours sitting in your car when you could be with your family or doing something else. So there's a whole slew of solutions that we have to look at. There's some talk about some sort of rail system or some sort of ferry system, a passenger ferry. It was actually part of the Olympic analysis, and that was actually part of the Olympic bid. Originally was a ferry going from Squamish to downtown Vancouver as part of the transportation solution, and the business case seemed to be quite viable, quite possible. So
they're revisiting that?
We've been sort of trying to bring it back into the conversation with the province for a number of years now. But it takes investments and forethought. You know, it takes some vision and some commitment to put into those things. What I'm hearing a little bit from the new government is the carbon tax was a neutral carbon tax. So they collect the carbon tax and just give it back to British Columbians, essentially. What it sounds like the new government may do is decouple that so that they actually have a revenue source. Carbon tax would actually go into carbon reducing things like transit, like these big infrastructure projects. So they haven't announced anything like that, but I have a sense that that may be one of the funding sources they start looking at.
Interesting. So going back to the concrete barriers, so this is something that's really highly in the news right now here in Squamish. Because of the accident that happened in early January, the families are now petitioning to have a barricade put in place. And you mentioned some of the difficulties that might happen. Do you think that they're going to kind of make this happen?
I think, unfortunately, these tragedies are what highlights likely an existing issue. And they become a bit of a lightning rod for finding a solution quickly. I think putting in cement barricades is absolutely, as you said, has proven statistically to reduce severity and the frequency of accidents. However, the statistics, and I'm just talking statistics, also prove that if you put them in the wrong place, they have a negative consequence. So I'm not an engineer, and I'm not one to say a cement barricade should go here or not. But I think there could be areas where a cement barricade could go in, but you need to add the other lane in order to make it safe. Where this particular accident happened, there's 3 lanes. Is there a way to put in a certain type of barricade that is relatively easy to adjust, so you can create the ability for first responders to get in there, and that type of thing? So I think all those solutions we need to look at. We need to look at the easy solutions, the inexpensive ones, really quickly and act on them. And these bigger infrastructure problems, we need to do the proper analysis. It's hard not to react to a tragedy because it's, I went to both of their funerals. It's absolutely heartbreaking what they're going through. Their communities are going through, what their families are going through. You can't find any rhyme or reason to why something like that would happen. A family of men going to work and trying to get back from work. And this tragedy affected the Sikh community, the Indo-Canadian community, back in 2004. 5 members of the Indo-Canadian community were in a car and died in an accident after working for a day, and 2 other members of our community died in the other car. These things are just horrendous things for a community and for family members to go through. And your heart just breaks. It absolutely breaks. And it's one of the hardest things as a mayor to actually know that how something like this is going to profoundly affect your community, because it does profoundly affect it, even if we don't know them directly, as we were talking. Like, it's the thing that binds all of our communities. It's the constant in our daily lives that we all share. And you want to be able to do something. Like, your first reaction is, what can we do? I want to fix this. And I think there's solutions out there to fix it. Part of it may be cement barricades, but they have to be put in the right location that actually makes it safer and not makes it. And I'm not the expert to determine that.
Well, hopefully that's something that everyone will consider instead of just saying put barricades up everywhere. It's like, it's not always necessarily the best idea.
Yeah.
If you wanted to get a message out there to our community, what would it be? What's your message to the community about keeping our roads safe?
Well, we actively work on this. This is the highway is a constant in our conversations at the district, in our lobbying efforts with the provincial government. It's never something that we just sit back and take for granted. It's always active. We don't get where we want to get to as quickly as we can, and so sometimes you do have to leverage these moments where people are listening and people are watching. And we're actively working on this, certainly from a transit point of view and these hotspots point of view, and the general safety of this highway. The other thing we're working on actively is we know we've become a commuter town. We know people, there's quite a few people that go up to Whistler. We know there's people that come down from Whistler. Our CAO commutes here every day. We know we have quite a few commuters to the city, and obviously people are up and down the city to go to soccer games and a whole slew of activities. But what we really want to do is make sure that we have the employment base here so that we can minimize the amount of commuters that are finding it necessary to go up to Whistler or to go to Vancouver. I think one of the reasons why Squamish has been so desirable for people is you really have a multitude of options for jobs here. Unlike Whistler, you're not going to commute to the city. Or Pemberton, obviously, you'll commute to Whistler, but in Squamish, you can hopefully find a job here. It's 30, 40 minutes up to Whistler, which is a very achievable commute time for a lot of people. Similarly, it's 45 minutes to an hour down to most of the lower mainland Vancouver area. So you can have a spouse that works in Whistler and works in Squamish, the other works in Squamish, and you have one that works in Vancouver and the other works in Whistler. So this has become a bit of a strategic location to create all sorts of economic job opportunities for people, and we do end up having quite a few commuters. So if we can figure out a way to tap into the talent here and actually bring the jobs that are meeting the skill set and the talent set and the objectives of our community, then that would benefit everybody, and you don't have to be on the highway as much and be commuting. And we've had a little bit of success lately at creating those big job creators. There's a large prefab home building company going into the North Yards, for example, and they're going to indirectly employ, probably 200 people once they're up and running. So, I mean, these things are starting to happen, but we have a very skilled demographic here in town, and so we're really trying to create those future-focused jobs that ideally allow you to not have to commute as much as we are.
So one last question for you, because I like to end things on a positive note. What's your favorite part of the drive on the Sea to Sky? Do you have a favorite spot?
I think I have to say, as you're coming out of Britannia Beach and you get that first glimpse of Squamish as you come down the hill there, and you just see the Howe Sound and you see Squamish right there, and you got Garibaldi and the Chief. It's so dramatic. It's so cool. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, it is a beautiful drive. And thanks so much for chatting with me
pleasure.
today about the Sea to Sky Highway. We hope that people just get out there and just keep safe.
Be safe, drive smartly, be mindful of the people around you and the drivers around you. Don't be distracted. I think if you're paying attention to what other people are doing, your likelihood to be able to react to that is just accentuated, and we just need people to be smart and safe, and people to get winter tires.
Yeah.
Drive the speed limit.
Okay.
So
thank you so much, Patty.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. The Sea to Sky Highway, it truly is one of the most beautiful drives in the world. So we want to keep it safe. So again, make sure you slow down, be safe, and enjoy the ride. For Upfront and Shaw Television, I'm Kristy Aleksich.